How much does it cost to buy land? I'm Ted Thomas, and I've been involved in real estate for over 30 years as an entrepreneur and an investor. Now, I operate that entrepreneurial business from a small office in my home. Now, just because the office is small doesn't mean the revenue has to be small. So what is this all about? This is all about how much does it cost to buy land? All right, so if you're watching YouTube videos, you're trying to get yourself educated. So let me give you some insider information. And I do that a lot on this channel. So there's a lot of other videos, but let's kind of get you started. Now, we're going to be talking about land and how do you price it? Well, that's a real challenge because it's not like houses where you can go down the street and you can pretty much figure out what the values are by looking at a couple of neighborhoods. Prices vary all over, and the formula is a little bit complicated for the people when they get started. All right, so there's a number of things that you have to think about when you think about real estate. Now, usually they measure it by the acre, or maybe the half acre or quarter acre, but basically it's measured by acres. So the purchase price could be hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, what is that based on? Well, I can tell you right now. If you bought an acre in Beverly Hills, California, you might have to spend for that acre a couple of $100,000 or more. Whereas an acre of land 10 miles outside of Topeka, Kansas, that acre of land might cost just pennies. All right, so let's try to sort it out. Location's always going to make a big difference, but land has a lot to think about. Land is purchased where people want to do things with real estate. Now, real estate goes on top of the land. So if you're going to have a real estate career and you want to have it in land, it's going to be much different than doing it if you're going to do it with single-family homes or vacant residential lots in neighborhoods. But if you're going to start talking about farms, well, it's going to change it a lot. So a piece of land could be completely undeveloped, or it could be residential land built into a subdivision, or it could be a buildable lot in the subdivision. So either way, real estate's going to have a lot of different values when it comes to valuing land. So today we're trying to figure out how much does it cost to buy the land. So how are you going to learn this process? Well, the best way to learn to start with is you could go to the United States Department of Agriculture and see how they're pricing the different kinds of land. Now, what would be different kinds? Could you have range land where the cattle are out there grazing? Could you have land that was for crops that's being cultivated? Could you have land that would be subdivision land? Could you have land that was set aside for parks and recreation? All right, you have to figure that out. So is the land buildable or is it unbuildable? Does it have water or it doesn't have water? Does it have utilities or it doesn't have utilities? All right, so all these things are going to come into account. So if someone says, Ted, what's the value of that land? My answer is, I don't have any idea what that land is worth until I do a lot of homework. So you're going to have to start doing your homework. Is it zoned? Well, zoned for what? Is it zoned for housing? Is it zoned for apartments? Is it zoned for commercial? Those are all different values. What about easements? What is easements? Well, can you get in ingress and egress to the property? All right, that could be complicated. So you could have easements across your land to someone else's land, or you trying to get across someone else's land to get to your land. All right, is it in a flood zone? All right, who decides the taxes? Well, I can tell you, commercial property is going to have a different tax than residential property. And, of course, agriculture is going to have an altogether different tax than that. So the point is, how much does it cost to buy the land? Well, you could start out with just some very basic land, which the Department of Agriculture might say is about $1,000 or $1,500. But then as soon as something happens on it, like they start bringing irrigation in, well, then it might be $4,000 or $5,000 an acre. So that's an altogether different thing. Then when you start adding in the development costs and the ordinance costs, well, those are going to add up to it. Or what if you had a piece of land and now you want to develop it? Well, you don't want to start out as a developer because that's a complicated business. Not only do you have the land, but what good is the land if it doesn't have water? Well, where is the water? What if it's 100 miles away? How are you going to get it there? Are you going to bring the pipes under the ground all the way to it? What if it doesn't have utilities? How are you going to get the utilities there? The people want that. How are you going to build in the sewers? All right, all those developments are restrictions. Now, they're restriction by the local county that's going to require that each one of those things is done in a certain way. So you might buy see a piece of land that costs $2,000 that's undeveloped. By the time they finish the development, it might suddenly be $20,000, $30,000, or even $50,000 per little lot where they're going to build a house. All right, so when they talk about an acre of land, you really got to think about it. There's a lot of things to have. All right, so where are you going to start? Well, I would start with the Department of Agriculture and see what they say just raw land is worth. And then I would find out what grazing land is worth. Then I would find out what land for development was worth. And they're all going to have some different nuances to them that you're going to have to learn before you can say, well, an acre of land here is worth X. Well, what kind of land is it? Is it developable or not? What if you couldn't develop it? What would you do with it? All right, so some people, they're going to do their due diligence. And where are you going to start? That's the big key to it, because there's going to be so many different prices. Now, if you're going to graze cattle on it, it's probably going to be pretty cheap land. All right, it's just going to have something for the cattle to eat on it. But if you're going to start doing things with it, like you're going to put crops with agriculture, that could triple the value of it overnight. All right, what if you're in California? Would that have a different value than Florida? Would Florida have a different value than New York? What if you had woods all over it? Do you want timberland? Well, timberland might be an advantage if you're going to cut it and sell the timber, but what if you're going to build on it? Do you want all that timber? No, probably not. You're going to have to cut it down, remove it. All that's going to cost money. You're going to have to get big trucks in there and men cutting up the wood and whatever. All right, so who are you going to get to clean up all this property? Well, if you're going to buy land, you've got to give it a lot of thought. And you got to give those utilities a lot of thought, because without utilities, the land is not being developed. So if it's not being developed, you don't have utilities here, what's it good for? Grazing and maybe some cultivation. And nowadays, cultivation might take a lot of water and a lot of electricity to pull that water onto the land. Okay, so what connects to it and what doesn't connect to it? So the question today is, how much does it cost to buy land? Well, in some cases, you could just pay pennies on the dollar to get land. Sometimes you can get it actually free, because the Department of Agriculture said, look, we want people to build in rural areas. So if you find the land, we'll finance the whole thing for you if you put a house on it and do all the things that they require for you to be eligible to have that. But the point is, you could get it very inexpensively. Well, if you're going to buy it inexpensively and you're going to develop it, you're going to take an awful lot of money. So where are you going to learn that? Well, you can learn that from attorneys. You could go down to your local city and go to the planning department and spend a few days there, and you would learn a lot. Why? Because the county records and the city records are not only going to have records, but they're going to show you what you can do and what you can't do with the land before you buy it. So you don't want to just go out and buy acreage because you think it's cheap. You want to say, why is it cheap? All right, because it could cost a lot of money to comply with the ordinances of the land and the building code. So the building code is going to say, no, you have to do this, no, you have to do that. The ingress has to be this, has to be that. All those things will have to be complied with, and they send people out to check. If you haven't done it right, you have to get a bulldozer and go start over again. So keep in mind, the government's going to get paid no matter what happens. What does the government want? They want permits every time something's finished. Before you can start it, you're going to have a permit so they can sign off on the permit. You're going to have to buy those things. These are things that are required. Well, if you're going to have to buy all that stuff, what's happening to the price of that land? So when someone asks, well, what's that land worth out there? You've really got to give it a lot of thought. And if they just snap their finger and give you an answer, that might not be the right answer. So developing land is probably one of the biggest challenges and most difficult challenge you could find in real estate. Why? Because there's so many complications to it. All right, now, and you want to sell land, that's going to be relatively easy. You could put that on Craigslist. You could put it on eBay. You could put it on Zillow. You could put it on multiple listings. You could put it on Facebook Marketplace. There's a lot of places to sell, but right away they're going to ask you the price. Well, if they're a savvy buyer, they're going to ask you a lot of other questions too. Everything from the water to where the roads are, they're going to ask you a lot of questions. All right. So I found a way to buy land at very low prices that was already approved. How is it approved? Well, these are all properties that have been approved, and they've already been on the tax roll. And what happened is the property owner didn't pay the tax. And so when they didn't pay the tax, the local government said, look, you didn't pay the tax. So they confiscate the property, and then they resell it back into the marketplace, and they use the money from reselling it to pay the tax. So that means they're going to give huge discounts. So when local government sells the property, they sell it at a discount of 60, 70, 80%. All right, if you can buy for 60, 70, or 80% and everything's already approved, well, that might work for you. So that's a subset of the traditional real estate, and it's called tax defaulted property. Why do I like those kind of properties? Well, I love those kind of properties because everything's already been approved, so I already know values. I can find values very easy, but now I'm going to buy 60, 70, 80% below the value. So that's going to help me a lot. Now, that business has been around for 200 years. Why don't we learn to take advantage of that? It's called tax defaulted properties. I've been involved in that business for well over 30 years. Now, I'm going to run out of time. I won't be able to tell you a lot about it on this video, but I have plenty of other videos on this channel that you can learn about that. But if you can buy properties for 10, 20 cents on the dollar and they don't have a mortgage on it, and you can buy it for those low prices, something you really ought to learn about. So right below me is an auction calendar. And if you'd like to have an auction list in your area, just go down there and request an auction list, and you'll get your first list absolutely free. All right, now, if you're going to get involved in this business, there's two mistakes that you can make, and they're both big ones. Don't buy any property unless you've had boots on the ground. Why? What if there was a hurricane the day before? What if there was a flood? What if there was a fire? What if it was next to a chicken farm? All of those things could be hazards that you don't want to buy into. All right, another hazard that's the biggest one, the biggest mistake people make, is they buy a property that they didn't look at, but then the second one is, guess what? They didn't figure out an exit strategy. They just bought because they wanted to buy. First thing you want to do is know what you could sell the property for, and then do your buying after that. I'm Ted Thomas.